There we go. Alright. Time to actually learn how to use Unreal Engine. Let's open Udemy. Start our course. Let's open Udemy. Start our course. Alright. I'll turn on the fight too while I'm doing this. How am I doing this? This fight kind of sucks though. I don't want to watch the main card, bro. I want to see Volk lose.
Welcome. So you're wanting to learn how to use Unreal Engine to make video games. You've probably seen some of the amazing games that have been made using Unreal, so you know that if you want to make your own games in Unreal Engine, you need to learn how to use it. But what is Unreal Engine exactly? It's important to understand that question, at least at a basic level, before you get started diving into Unreal. So if I were to ask you right now, what is Unreal Engine? What would you say? You'd probably say something like, well, it's the software that was used to create video games like Fortnite. So we all have a basic understanding that Unreal Engine is used to make video games. But what does all of that entail? How do you make video games? Well, Unreal Engine is what we typically refer to as a game engine. Engine here is a pretty broad term that encompasses a lot of different capabilities packaged into one giant piece of software. More accurately, we call it a software framework, or a collection of multiple different components that all come together to give you the tools to develop your own software applications, or in our case, games. Now all of that sounds very technical, so let's break it down at a very basic level. What are the different components that have to exist in a game engine to make it, well, a game engine? There are many different components that make up a game engine, and Unreal Engine in particular is adding new ones all the time. So we don't need to cover every single feature of the engine, but we'll just mention a few here. The most basic requirement for a game engine is perhaps the rendering system. This is the ability to generate an image on the screen. Now, there's a lot of technical details that go into this very basic requirement. When you play a video game, you're constantly looking at the screen, and that screen is continuously rendering an image, and usually that image is changing very rapidly to give you the feeling that things are moving in the game. Now, usually you're holding some sort of controller, or pressing buttons on a keyboard, moving a mouse, or pressing on a touchscreen while you're playing a game. These are all forms of input. A game engine needs a way to take that input and translate that into game actions, so game engines need some form of input system to handle that. Games usually generate sounds and play music while the game is running, so the game engine needs an audio system to handle all of that audio. When objects move around in a game, there's often a physics system that performs all of the calculations necessary to make objects fall, bounce, roll, and fly through the air. The physics system makes those calculations to determine the positions of objects in the game. Speaking of objects, the game engine needs a way to handle assets, 2D textures and images, 3D objects, which we refer to as meshes, sounds and music, animations. These are all assets that need to be imported into the game engine, and there needs to be a system to handle those files so they can be used in the game. Games almost always have buttons, progress bars, menus, and inventory systems, and these are all part of a game's UI, or user interface. There needs to be a way to create the UI for the game and link it up with the actions that those UI elements are supposed to affect. Now, all of these features are typically built into a game engine. It's not expected for a game developer to create their own physics system, for example. These are all part of the game engine package that game developers use when they're creating their games. So how does a game developer use those systems to create their own games? Well, a game engine typically has a scripting system designed for game developers to use. How do you make a football fly through the air? You don't need to calculate your own physics equations for projectile motion. Those are already built into the engine. You need to access those physics capabilities through the scripting system, a set of functions and routines that you can use to tell the physics system what to do. Now, this doesn't just pertain to physics. The scripting system allows game developers to access all of the systems necessary to create gameplay. Scripting allows game developers to access libraries of pre-written code to implement what we refer to as game logic. These scripting systems are typically some programming language, though Unreal Engine has blueprints, which are based more on visuals than lines of text. And for that reason, they're much more approachable and easier to learn than a text-based programming language. You're still scripting, but you're using a more user-friendly system to do it. Now, game engines encompass much more than this short list of features. For example, multiplayer games connect players from across the globe and allow them to play games with each other across the internet. So a networking system is needed to achieve multiplayer functionality, for example. When you see smoke and fire, sparks, electricity, and other special effects, those are handled by an effects system that generates what we call particles. These can really make a game pop. So just keep in mind that there's a lot under the hood of any game engine, and Unreal Engine is no exception. You don't have to master all of the components of the engine. In fact, Unreal Engine is such a vast system that you're rarely ever going to find a person who knows everything about every single system. Game developers often specialize in specific areas in game engines and master those areas so they can do their jobs well. But as you develop your own games, you're going to get exposure to many of the systems in Unreal, and it's going to be very exciting to see them come together to create your game experiences. So enough talking about game engines. We now have a basic understanding of some of the things that they contain. It's now time to open Unreal Engine and see some of those systems hands-on. So let's get started.
The drone, human character kicks, and the sci-fi vehicle were created by Danny Peterson, the creator of indie game Chaos Kart. Kicks was rigged and animated by professional animator Aaron Caparo. The sound effects were created by professional sound engineer Carlos Jimenez. Special thanks to all their hard work. Please download the attachment for this lecture right in the tab. We'll be using all these assets throughout the various parts. To zip, I gotta unzip it, bro.
Welcome and congratulations for joining the course. In this video, we're going to talk about the most useful resource that you have while taking this course, the Druid Mechanics Discord community. The Druid Mechanics Discord community is a Discord server going on 30,000 members, all interested in various aspects of game development, and we're all here helping each other out. We have all types of game developers, from beginners to hobbyists to industry veterans working for AAA game companies. This is a great opportunity to meet people and talk about what you're working on, ask for help, and also help newer students when they need your heroic assistance. I myself am a very active member in the community, and we do tons of fun game development related activity, such as hosting game jams and art jams, where you have a limited amount of time to create a small scoped game or art, and we vote on a winner. And we host progress meetings, where we all meet up and discuss what we're working on, sharing our screens, giving feedback, and practicing our presenting skills. And most importantly, there's a channel for each of my courses, including this one. This is where people can ask questions related to a specific course and get help if they're stuck, and common pitfalls and frequently asked questions are here, as well as helpful additional information that accumulates here. If you get stuck anywhere in the course, chances are someone else has solved the problem, so it's worth checking out on the Discord channel for this course for solutions. Me and my team are always here hanging out as we work. So the Druid Mechanics Discord community is your #1 resource for help and advice, collaboration, meeting other like-minded individuals, and perhaps finding a study buddy and even just bouncing ideas off of one another when it comes to game development and learning. So your first challenge in this course is to go to the Druid Mechanics Discord community if you haven't already, and go to the rules channel. Make sure you read all of the rules. I know all Discord servers have rules and typically people skip those, but in this case I don't want you to skip the rules. I'd like you to read them as they're very important. And once you've read the rules, jump on over to the Welcome channel. This is the big part of your challenge. I'd like you to introduce yourself in the Welcome channel and talk about your goals. Why are you taking this course? What are your plans? Would you like to get into the gaming industry or create your own indie game dev team? Are you doing this just as a hobby? And if you've already posted here before, maybe post a new welcome message and talk about what you're doing now. So post here in the welcome, talk a little bit about yourself, say which course you're currently taking, and throw down some wave emojis to some of the other newcomers in the server. And after that, jump on over to chat. See what's going on, say hello, and socialize a little bit. This is your first challenge of the course, and it's a really fun one. You're really going to enjoy being part of this community. Lots of students have really vocalized how much they appreciate having a community for these courses and for game development in general. So conquer this first challenge of the course, and I'll see you in the next video. Welcome. So we're ready to download Unreal Engine. I have the Unreal Engine website up here, which is simply unrealengine.com. Now, you only need to enter unrealengine.com. This /ENUS was added there automatically as soon as I hit enter into my web browser. Now, because I'm in the US and my default language is English, we have EN-US. If you're in a different country or your language is different, you may see something else here, but you'll still be on the same website. And we're ready to download the engine, but first... Okay, so we've jumped through a bunch of hoops just to get the Epic Games launcher and get Unreal Engine installed on our machines. And now we're ready to actually launch the engine and see what that's all about. Now on my screen, don't worry about this installed plugins right here. If I click on it, it just tells me that there's an update available for this particular plugin. Now, we'll talk more about this plugin later in the course when we're going to use PaperZD. I can simply update that plugin and get rid of that message. In fact, I can do that right now, but you don't have that message because you haven't installed the PaperZD plugin in your engine version. We'll do that later. Don't worry about that. But now I don't have a exclamation point there, so nothing to worry about there. But we're ready to launch the engine now, and what we can do is simply click on Launch. Now, how long it takes to load up, that's going to depend on your machine, how powerful it is, but just give it a few moments. And now we have the Unreal Project browser. Now, just like we had in our library and the Epic Games launcher, there are a number of projects here for me. If you've never created any projects, you won't have any here. So there's nothing for it to show. But as you create projects, they'll start popping up here, and that just gives you an easy way to select those projects and open them up. But we're going to navigate away from the Recent Projects tab and go down to Games. Now there are a number of other tabs because Unreal Engine is capable of handling not just games, but other things like architecture, automotive, simulation. It's quite an amazing engine. But we're focusing on games for this course, so we're going to click on Games. And now we have the opportunity to create a new project, and we can create a completely blank project, or we can choose from among these template projects, which, as I mentioned in the previous video, contain some assets and some code, and you can literally create projects starting from these starting points and build on them. And that's often what people do when prototyping or learning. So if you click on one of these and select them, we get a little thumbnail image along with the description for that template project. For example, the third person project features a playable character, where the camera is positioned behind and slightly above the character. So these give you examples for basic functionality. Now we're just going to create a blank project. This is going to be our very first Unreal Engine project, and as you can see, it's blank. Now the thumbnail for you might be different. It may show something different because they change the blank project from time to time. In fact, this entire Unreal Project browser changes from time to time. Previous Unreal Engine versions had a browser that looked a little bit different, and later versions in the future may look different from this one. But the process is the same. You're just going to choose a template or choose blank. Now there are a couple of project defaults. You can choose Blueprint, you can choose C++, but this is a Blueprint course. We're only going to create Blueprint projects. Just FYI, you can always turn a Blueprint project into a C++ project, but we're focusing on Blueprint. Now for the target platform, you can choose desktop or mobile, but we're going to choose desktop, and you don't have to mess with quality preset. It's already set to maximum, but there's a checkbox here for starter content, and this will add some assets that we can use in our project. And these are things like basic pieces of geometry, basic effects from sounds to particles like fire. These allow a beginner to have something that they can work with while they're learning. So we're going to check that starter content checkbox. And this is also something that you can add to your project later. If you create a project and you forget to check that checkbox, starter content can be added later, and we'll go over that as well. Now, ray tracing is a technology that Unreal Engine is capable of. It's more taxing on your computer. You need a GPU or graphics card that can handle ray tracing. And I encourage you to go research what ray tracing is if you're interested in diving deeper into that. But we're going to leave that unchecked. I typically do. And finally, at the bottom, we have project location and project name. Now, I like to create a folder that I keep my projects in. That way I can easily find it on my computer. So I've created a UE5 projects folder. And notice this is not on my C drive. You can put your projects on your C drive if you like. I typically put them on a secondary hard drive so I don't fill up my C drive. My secondary hard drive has a lot more space. Now, depending on your machine specs, it may take longer to load from a secondary hard drive than the time it takes to load from the C drive. I personally don't notice much of a difference. And you can ask me about my machine specs in the Druid Mechanics Discord if you're interested. So I'm going to choose my UE5 projects folder, and we need to give our new project a name. Now, this first project that we're going to create is just for getting our feet wet in Unreal Engine. It's just for learning. So we're going to call this our Section 1 project. Now, feel free to name this something else if you want to call it something else. I'm going to call it Section 1. That's my project name. It's not too important what you call the project. If you're making a game, it doesn't have to be called your game's title by any means. This is just the name of our project. Whatever you call it, give it a name, and make sure that you have blank selected. We're not going to touch these template projects, at least not just yet. So make sure that that is selected, make sure that Blueprint is selected and not C++, and click on Create. And here we have our Unreal Engine project. We have now launched the engine, and this is what the engine editor looks like. And what you see here is something that will also change from engine version to engine version. Sometimes the UI changes its look. slightly. Usually later versions look a little bit more sleek. The colors and shades might be a little different, but overall we have the same thing here. Now, what you see in this very large window, the most prominent window here, this is the viewport, and it's showing us a game level. And again, this game level may be different for you. Earlier versions of the engine didn't show what I see here. It was a different level. So even though we chose blank, it's not really blank. There's a few things in this level. It looks like a big terrain, right? And that's because that's what they chose to have their default blank level start at. So whatever you see here, don't worry, we're going to replace it with an even more blank level. Now down at the bottom left, there's a content drawer. And it may be harder for you to read on the screen, and for that reason, I'm going to change my display settings on my computer so that things are a little bit larger on my screen. Now, you don't have to do this. I'm doing this just to make it easier for you as you're watching this. Some people are watching on smaller screens or mobile devices. So we're going to change the scale of things here in Unreal Engine. I'm going to click on the very top on the gray area so that I undock my Unreal Engine editor window. It looks like there's this other window here that says Content Browser. That popped up automatically for me. I'm going to close that. And just on my Windows desktop, I'm going to go to my display settings for this screen, and I'm going to change the size of text, apps, and other items to 125. That's going to make things larger, easier to read, and it's going to make my Unreal Engine editor look a little bit different than yours now. The only thing is, things are scaled up a little bit larger so it's easier for you to read. Now I can click on that content drawer here, which has a pop-up that says opens a temporary content browser above this status, which will dismiss when it loses focus. Just about everything in Unreal Engine has a little tooltip that pops up when you hover over things. Dismiss when it loses focus, well, that just means if we click somewhere, like here in the viewport, that content drawer goes away. So it pops up and goes away on its own. You can click on content drawer to bring it up and dismiss it. You can also use that little hotkey that it says, which is Control Spacebar. That's going to pop it up and bring it back down. So there are always multiple ways to do the same thing in Unreal Engine. Now, when I bring up the content drawer, I have a folder structure for my project. It starts with all, and then it goes to content. In some earlier versions of the engine, it just said content. In later versions, it may switch back to just saying content, but in this version we see all. It doesn't matter. The content folder contains the things that you want to add to your Blueprint project. And I started my project with starter content, which if I click on it, I see to the right all the folders in starter content. If I expand the drop down, I can see it here in my list view. And if you don't have a starter content folder, well, that means you likely forgot to check the starter content checkbox. And as I mentioned, you can always add starter content to a project if you didn't add that when creating the project. You can add it with the add button here. If you click on add, if we want to add starter content, we can go up to the top where it says add feature or content pack. And we have some options. We can even add content from the template projects if we'd like that in our blank project. But we're going to go over to content and choose starter content. Now, I didn't forget to check that checkbox, so I already have starter content. I don't need to add it to my project, but if you forgot and you want that starter content, go ahead and select add to project, and then you will have your starter content folder. And these folders contain lots of assets, well, not lots, but a few that you can add to your projects. But we're not going to dive into that just yet. What we're going to do is create a new folder in our content folder. I almost always add this folder we're about to add to my content folders in all my projects. And I can add that by right-clicking here in the gray area and select
No, 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 no. Let me talk to you.
The way you see an idea in your mind and shape it into something that could only come from you.
In this video, I'm going to show you how you can add starter content assets into Unreal Engine 5.6 or later. And starter content are a set of assets such as static meshes, textures, materials, blueprints that you were able to add into any project and use those assets to create with. And since 5.6, they have been discontinued and removed, very likely due to the rage and how outdated they were. So you can see if I launch 5.7 Unreal Project Browser and try to add starter content, I no longer have that little check mark to enable for any template. As well as inside existing projects, you no longer can go to add and add in starter content like you used to. However, you can still use starter content in 5.6 or later to create with. So here's how. First, you need a previous version of the engine, 5.5 or below. In my case, I have 5.3. Simply go ahead and launch the Unreal Engine Project Browser so you can create the project.
I should just downgrade, honestly. Let's see. Guys, what are you crying for? Ledger. What are you crying for, dude? Couldn't get off your answer.
But first, I'm going to bring your attention over to this documentation page. The link will be in the resources for this video. This page outlines the hardware and software specifications for Unreal Engine. Now, you'll want to make sure that your system meets the requirement contains assets and packs that are temporarily free. And I typically like to check out the free to detect where you have projects on your machine and shows a little thumbnail image of those projects, as well as a little number at the bottom right. This is showing me what engine version this project is compatible with. Typically, it's the version that this project was created in. So I have a 5.0 version, and I even have some Unreal Engine 4 versions of projects here. Scrolling down past my projects, there's a vault. And this is where those assets that I've downloaded from the marketplace are located. Now, some of these are packs that contain multiple assets, and we have options to add them to projects. And we'll get to that process later in the course as well. And as you download asset packs from the marketplace, you'll start to see your vault filling up. So all the way back up to the top under engine versions, this is where we'll download and install various Unreal Engine versions. Now, before we do that, let's take a look at the bottom left. We have a downloads section here. If you click on that, we get a pop out, and this shows you things that are currently downloading, such as asset packs or Unreal Engine versions. We also have a video and give this some time to install. Okay, so once your installation has completed, your gray tab will now turn into a blue tab.
Our 5.3.2, let's get that one. I'm not. So what?
Sometimes you need a different version of the Unreal Engine. Here we're going to go ahead and open the Epic Games Launcher. I have Unreal Engine 5.6.0. For using virtual production, I need Unreal version 5.5.4. I can install an earlier version of Unreal Engine by going to Library, clicking on Engine Versions. So right here it says install a new version of the Unreal Engine. I'll click this version, and then I want to select which version I want.
Oh, that's how you do it. Okay.
You making a game?
Oh, not yet. You gotta download a different version of the Unreal Engine.